To a lot of folks in America, you come across as the cares about everybody but me party. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can find ways to stand up for these folks without being David Duke. This month, when the Democrats finally passed their big $1 trillion bill to rebuild our roads and bridges, 6 Democrats voted no because it didn't go far enough to address climate change, which I'm sure is true. What does? But this was free money from the federal government that would actually improve their constituents' lives. I can see a voter saying, you know, squad, I agree with you on climate change. But as long as it is happening, we also need money for getting the water pumped out of the subway. Can we do that before we build the workers' paradise?
So that is Bill Maher from just a few days ago. And after months of the debates, very public debates about the infrastructure bill, his takeaway from it is that the squad didn't care about infrastructure enough, I guess. They wanted something vague that he could mock, this workers' paradise. They didn't care about the flooding of the subway. They didn't care about these sorts of things. And he used that to demonstrate his larger point, which is Democrats are unpopular because they don't get America, okay? He actually attached that video to this tweet saying, why are the Democrats still, who support so many issues that benefit the middle class, still considered out of touch by 62% of Americans? He threw in his hashtag woke is a joke because much of that 8-minute long video is about how the Democrats are too woke. And by that, he means that any anecdotal thing that's happening literally anywhere in the country that the right talks about, the Democratic Party is responsible for. AOC is responsible for whatever apocryphal comment a teacher supposedly made in a small town in Kansas. Now, AOC spent the week talking about the potential threats to the Democrats in the midterms. She's gonna go in a very different direction. So in this block, we're gonna be contrasting these two takes on what the Democrats need to do to succeed. But first, Brett, I wanna give you a chance to jump in.
So I watched all of Bill's speech in that, and he has everything he needs to solve this puzzle.
Yep.
But he just doesn't see it. He, in that same block, his monologue or whatever, he says that Amy Klobuchar was on his program, and he told Amy Klobuchar that she is failing the messaging battle against Republicans, and Amy Klobuchar is so clueless that she then goes in a very I'm very as funny as Garrison Keillor used to be. She says, well, you wanna be one too? You wanna be our messaging czar?
He took that seriously.
The left, and he took it seriously, but he's right. The left has nobody messaging effectively. What he doesn't understand, his blind spot, is that he has bought into all the counter messaging, or I guess the messaging that's happening on the right. Why? Because they've found a way. He doesn't realize it. He's not smart enough to figure that out. But they've found a way to message to him. When he says the we care about everyone but you party, he is talking about himself. He doesn't understand, and he's not really self-aware enough to understand that there's other people other than him out there. And I totally take your point that AOC is not responsible for all the messaging that's happening. But I will say that the Democrats are good at messaging against Democrats.
Yes.
That whole frame, everything you saw Bill Maher mention about subways in New York was taken from one article, not written on Common Dreams or TYT or some crazy thing, some bubbled off thing, but from the New York Times. The article is called Ocasio-Cortez Isn't Wavering, Are New Yorkers on Her Side? He is absolutely wrong when he talks about why they voted no. He's wrong.
He has all of the information, as you said, that he needs to have to know why they did that. So he's either insanely ignorant, or more likely, he's just lying because he doesn't support them. To come out of all of this and say the ones who are standing between people who need help and that help are the progressives is an insane thing to say, unless you are an old rich guy with old rich guy positions. And that's what he has. And we're supposed to believe that because he had an HBO show that I guess he's different than Manchin or whatever.
But I agree with him. I agree with him that what you just said doesn't help the goals of the left.
Well, here's what doesn't help the goals of the left or the Democratic Party. Living your life like Bill Maher, where he came from the 80s into the 90s, where the Democrats learned to be terrified of and always responsive to literally anything the right says about them, and to cede whatever territory is necessary. Start bailing out all of your positions because the right might criticize them, and that is how you should live. And whatever is left over at the end, which coincidentally is almost always giving the rich what they want, I guess that's all we can afford. And he says there, you have to learn to stand up for these folks without being David Duke. Look, it is very easy for this incredibly old white man to jettison all of these concerns and pretend that they're not important, to believe that the only identity politics that should be allowed, and that he's saying should be allowed to be the status quo, is white identity grievance politics.
Right,
but anyway, I don't want to get into it. We got to read the AOC stuff. My point is, he still wants the debate to be about wokeness. He's the one that's talking about that. AOC is not talking about that. AOC is talking about infrastructure. He is the one that wants to play on the battleground of the right, while not only accepting their talking points, but spreading them themselves. He has spent years now mocking these sorts of concerns. And then at the end in that video, he says, well, if this is so popular, if it's so common sense, so rational, why do people have negative opinions of it? Dude, you've spent years messaging against it. So anyway, to pretend that he's some sort of objective source for information on this is absurd. Now, to demonstrate my point that she is not doing what he says she's doing, this is what she has had to say about the last few months and about the electoral future that we're looking towards. I think that if we pass the Build Back Better Act, as the House passed it, that we have a shot to go back to our communities and say we delivered. But that's not to say that this process has not been demoralizing for a lot of folks, because there were enormous promises made. And this is where I have sounded the alarm, because what really dampens turnout is when Democrats make promises that they don't keep. Ocasio-Cortez specifically pointed to a bunch of money in the bipartisan bill, including to get lead pipe remediation done. They cut a ton of that. They're continuing to fund the fossil fuel industry. She says that a lot of the promises will not now be made good on because of centrists. And what I would say is, Bill Maher is pointing to a major drop in popularity of Biden from the beginning of the year to now. His argument is that it's the wokeness thing. But the issue is the electorate threw out the Democrats and replaced them with Trump, presumably because the left had been too wokey or whatever. But then they voted in Biden, and now they don't like Biden. Is that because he wasn't woke 9 months ago and now he is woke? Is that the only thing that's happened through 2021? Or is it possible that AOC's analysis, that they came in, they were put into power in the White House and in the Senate, making specific policy promises, and the message that has been fairly clear, if the process might have been muddled throughout this year, is that, I don't know, a bunch of corrupt Democrats stalled, nothing really seems to be getting done. I hear that they keep cutting stuff out. Which is more likely to explain the drop in popularity through 2021? Vague stuff about wokeness, or the possibility that he's not doing the things he said he would do?
Right, and the success of the messaging that Biden is a radical socialist woke psychopath. That's it. The ability of the right-wing messaging sphere to, as you say, to convince Bill Maher that woke culture is responsible for fill in the blank, when really nothing's happened. Really nothing's happened. And he said that Biden's approval rating did not succeed in this is the longer Bill Maher thing, despite giving checks to people in the pandemic. But he was more popular back then. That you agree to that.
That's a great point.
Bill Maher, you absolutely said if his approval rating's down since then, it was up back then.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's 100%. I totally agree with you on this. The left just doesn't have anyone going out there. But what the right has done and what mainstream media has done, and this is something that Bill Maher, I think there should be. You gotta win Bill Maher. What he doesn't understand is that Trump being an a-hole alienated, that like culture war thing, alienated centrist Democrat, Republican independents in suburbs, and they were like, I'm either not supporting Trump or I'm voting for Biden. But you can't deny that a lot of this push toward giving people what they need and want in real America, there's a huge divide between the liberal elites and the people on the left who are in unions and fighting for workers' rights. But they just I don't know, but it's very frustrating. Bill Maher is out there being this guy who thinks that he is the only voice out there speaking for like decency when he completely forgets the fact that this whole push that he's against motivated people to turn out en masse in Georgia to vote against Trump that hadn't before. So at the end of his argument, he says you got to grow the electorate.
Yeah.
The Democrats did with talk like this.
Well, and look, if your case is going to be that wokeness, these concerns, like he specifically says, like you don't get to call yourself a liberal if you teach kindergartners that they're the oppressors, which is, AOC talks about that constantly, the kindergartners are the oppressors, that they've gone too far in these racial concerns, that they should abandon the racial language, which is, again, is convenient for him to say. Then why exactly did they throw out the Republicans in the White House and the Senate after literally months of pervasive racial justice protests around? Like if you wanted to make the Republican case that America's gone crazy, the left has gone crazy, okay, well, from their perspective, we did that for months in cities around the country, and they threw out Trump and they threw out the Republicans. They literally handed 2 Senate seats in Georgia to the Democrats following all that woke nonsense. But anyway, I want to get into this next super fast then.
Just the question for Bill Maher is like, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? Because the answer's got to be policies that help Americans. And that's why I say he has everything he needs in his argument. He thinks it's just roads and bridges. It's not paid family leave, lower prescription drug prices, all that stuff. That's all that we want. So let's just, Bill, I'm with you, shake my hand and let's go forward and message.
He wants to talk about cancel culture. That's what he wants to talk about.
That's how they win Bill Maher.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.